You have been standing in that grocery store produce section every single week picking up the bunch of green onions, the same plastic's clamshell of lettuce, the same bundle of herbs you only need half of, dropping them into your cart, bringing them home, using what you need, and watching the rest turn yellow and soft in your refrigerator by Thursday. And then you go back the following week and do it again. And the week after that, you have probably spent more money on vegetables that rotted before you finished them than you want to actually add up. And at some point, you told yourself you should just grow your own. Maybe you even tried. You bought some seedlings, you put them in the ground, and by midsummer the production slowed, the plant bolted, and you were back at the store. Let me stop you right there, because I want to say something clearly. That is not a gardening failure. That is a plant selection failure, and it was never your fault. Here is what most people do not realize. Most commercial vegetables are selected for shipping, storage, shelf uniformity, and visual appeal at the point of sale, not because they are the best long-term producers for a home garden. Those are two completely different sets of priorities, and nobody at the grocery store or nurseries is obligated to explain that difference to you. The result is that most home gardeners spend years buying and replanting vegetables that were never optimized for what a home garden actually needs, which is continuous production with minimal effort. Today, that changes. I am going to show you 9 vegetables you can start from a single grocery store purchase and grow at home for ongoing harvests, season after season, with far less replanting than you are doing right now. Some of these will feed you for years from one planting. Others will dramatically reduce how often you need to go back to the store. And there is one plant on this list that most home gardeners have never thought to regrow. And it produces more usable food per square foot than almost anything else you can grow in a backyard bed. We are going to get to that very soon. Do not skip ahead. Quick question before we continue. Drop your state in the comments. It helps me see where this community is growing food, so I can make future videos for your climate and conditions. Now let us get into plant number 1. The first vegetable on this list is green onions. And I know what you are thinking. You have seen the viral video. You stuck some scallion roots in a glass of water on your windowsill, watched them grow an inch, got bored, and threw them out. That is not what I am talking about. What most people do not know is that green onions planted in actual soil, not water, become a near-permanent perennial crop that you can harvest from repeatedly for years. The reason water propagation feels underwhelming is that the plant has no access to soil nutrients, so it regenerates slowly and produces thin, weak regrowth. When you transplant those same roots into a 4-inch deep container or a garden bed with decent compost, the biology changes completely. The plant root system establishes, draws up nitrogen and phosphorus, and produces full, thick, harvestable shoots within 10 days. Cut them an inch above the soil, and the plant does not die. It sends up new growth within a week. You are not harvesting a plant. You are harvesting from a living system that resets itself repeatedly. The variety to look for at the grocery store is evergreen hardy white, which is the most commonly sold bunching onion in American supermarkets. It is cold hardy to zone 3, tolerates light frost without damage, and in zone 7 and above it will produce for most of the year without any protection. Plant the roots 2 inches apart, water them in once, and then leave them alone. Do not fertilize heavily. Excess nitrogen pushes leaf growth so fast that the flavor turns sharp and hollow. A light top dressing of compost in spring is all they need. The bonus detail most people miss is that green onion flowers, if you let a few plants bolt in late spring, are edible and attractive, and they draw beneficial insects to your garden that improve the production of everything growing around them. The second vegetable is garlic, and garlic may be the single most underestimated regrowing vegetable in existence. You have bought garlic at the grocery store hundreds of times. What you probably did not know is that every single clove in that bulb is a fully viable seed that will produce a complete new bulb of garlic in 8 to 9 months. One bulb of grocery store garlic contains 8 to 12 cloves. 8 to 12 cloves planted in fall produce 8 to 12 full bulbs by the following July. Those bulbs contain 8 to 12 cloves each. The math becomes significant very quickly. The reason most people do not do this is that they have heard grocery store garlic is treated to prevent sprouting. This is partially true for imported garlic, which is often irradiated or chemically treated. The solution is simple. Buy organic garlic from the grocery store or a farmer's market. Organic garlic is not treated, and it will sprout and grow without any issue. Plant individual cloves pointed end up, 2 inches deep, 6 inches apart, in October or November in most American climates. They will root before the ground freezes, go dormant over winter, and push green shoots up in late February or early March, before almost anything else in your garden is moving. Hardneck varieties like Rocambole and Purple Stripe are the most flavorful and the most cold-hardy, performing well from Zone 3 through Zone 8. Do not water heavily once the tops begin to yellow in early summer. That yellowing is the plant pulling its energy down into the bulb, and excess moisture at that stage causes rot. When half the leaves have yellowed, pull the bulbs, cure them in a dry shaded spot for 3 weeks, and you will have more garlic than you know what to do with. Save the largest cloves from your best bulbs for replanting in fall, and you will rarely need to buy garlic again. The third vegetable is sweet potatoes, and this is the one I mentioned at the top of this video. The one that produces more usable food per square foot than almost anything else in a home garden, and the one that almost nobody thinks to regrow. A single sweet potato from the grocery store will produce multiple plants through a process called slipping, and each plant will yield several new tubers by the end of the growing season. Place your grocery store sweet potato halfway submerged in a jar of water in a warm, sunny window. Within 2 to 3 weeks, multiple green shoots called slips will emerge from the surface. Once those shoots reach 4 to 6 inches tall and show small root development at their base, twist them off the tuber and plant them directly into warm garden soil or a large container. Each slip becomes a new plant, and one sweet potato typically produces 8 to 12 slips. Beauregard is the variety most commonly sold in American grocery stores, and it is reliable, productive, and suited to a wide range of climates. It needs a long, warm season, at least 90 days above 65 degrees, which means it performs best in zones 5 through 11. In zones 5 and 6, start your slips indoors in March to give the plants maximum growing time. Do not add nitrogen fertilizer once the vines are established. Nitrogen pushes vine growth at the direct expense of tuber development, and a heavily fertilized sweet potato plant can produce beautiful sprawling vines and almost no actual food. A low nitrogen, high phosphorus fertilizer applied once at planting is all this crop needs. I want to take a moment here, because if you have made it this far into this video, you are not someone who just pins gardening photos and never goes outside. You are someone who is genuinely tired of spending money on food that disappears, tired of gardens that produce for 3 weeks and then stop, tired of advice that sounds good on paper and fails in your actual backyard. Easy Harvest Gardens exists for exactly that person. This channel is built around one idea, which is that a home garden should feed you continuously, not just seasonally, and it should do that without turning into a second job. If that is what you are looking for, subscribe right now. It is free, it is here every single week, and every video is built around the same question. What actually works in a real yard with a real life happening around it? Hit subscribe and then let us keep going. The fourth vegetable is romaine lettuce. You buy a romaine heart at the store, use the leaves, and you are left with a pale base that most people throw into the compost. That base will regrow. Set it cut side up in a shallow dish of water for 3 days until you see new leaf growth emerging from the center. Then transplant it into moist potting mix. It will not produce a full second head identical to the first, but it will give you a useful flush of tender new leaves, and that is genuinely worth having. The real value here is timing. Regrowing romaine from grocery store bases in late August and early September gives you a fall harvest that is sweeter and more tender than what you buy in summer, because cool temperatures between 45 and 65 degrees convert the plant's starches into sugars in a way that warm season growth cannot replicate. Little Gem romaine is the variety most commonly sold in grocery stores, and it regrows most reliably. It fits in a 6-inch container, and the leaves it produces on regrowth are noticeably sweeter than the original. Harvest the outer leaves and leave the center growing excess to extend your window as long as possible before the plant eventually bolts. The fifth vegetable is celery. Regrowing celery from the grocery store base is one of the most satisfying quick wins in home gardening, and it works reliably. Cut the base 2 inches from the bottom, set it in a shallow dish with just enough water to cover the root end, place it in a bright window, and within 5 days you will see pale green growth emerging from the center. Transplant it into rich potting mix once the new growth reaches an inch tall, and it will produce harvestable stalks within 3 weeks. This will not replace your entire celery supply, but it will give you a steady source of fresh stalks for cooking at almost zero cost. And it eliminates the waste of buying a full bunch when you only needed a few ribs. The variety sold in virtually every American grocery store is Utah 5270. It prefers cool temperatures, so spring and fall are your most productive windows. In zones 8 through 10, you can grow it through winter outdoors. A self-watering container is the single best upgrade you can make for celery, because it needs consistent moisture without sitting in standing water. The sixth vegetable is kale. Kale stem cuttings can be rooted and grown on, and many gardeners have had success with this method. Cut a healthy stem into 4-inch sections, each containing at least 1 leaf node. Push them into moist potting mix at a 45-degree angle with the node facing upward, and keep the soil consistently moist in a warm location. Results vary depending on the freshness of the grocery store stems and how they were handled post-harvest. So treat this as a worthwhile experiment rather than a guaranteed outcome. When it works, and it often does, you end up with a productive kale plant for free. Lacinato kale, also called dinosaur kale or Tuscan kale, is the variety that roots most reliably from cuttings and is widely available in American grocery stores. It is hardy to zone 3, grows 2 to 3 feet tall, and produces dark, deeply textured leaves that are more nutritious and better flavored than the curly varieties most people are used to. The care instruction most people miss is this: let your kale experience light frost before you harvest heavily. Frost triggers a biological response that converts stored starches into sugars, making the leaves noticeably sweeter. Gardeners who harvest before the first frost are leaving the best flavor on the table. The seventh vegetable is cabbage. When you harvest a head of cabbage and leave the root and base stem, the ground, or in a container, the plant will produce several smaller secondary heads from the nodes along the remaining stem. These are not as large as the original head, but they are often sweeter and more tender, and they represent a meaningful second harvest from a plant you already grew. Copenhagen market is the variety most commonly available as grocery store cabbage in the United States. It is cold hardy to zone 3 and regrows reliably from the cut stem. Plant it in early spring or late summer, since cabbage is a cool season crop that bolts in sustained summer heat. Cut the original head as close to the base as possible, rather than leaving a long stem, which concentrates the plant's regrowth energy into fewer, larger secondary heads, rather than spreading it thinly across too many growth points. The eighth vegetable is ginger, and ginger is the one on this list that genuinely shocks people when they realize it grows in an American backyard or container. Any piece of grocery store ginger root that has a visible growth node, the small, slightly raised bumps on the surface of the root, will sprout and produce new ginger when planted in warm, moist, well-draining soil. Break your grocery store ginger into 2-inch pieces, each containing at least 1 node. Soak them in warm water overnight to remove any growth retardant residue, and Plant them 2 inches deep in rich potting mix with the node facing upward. In zones 8 through 12, you can grow ginger outdoors year-round. In colder zones, a large container brought indoors before the first frost will continue producing. The plant grows 2 to 4 feet tall with attractive lance-shaped leaves. Do not harvest until at least 8 months after planting. Ginger needs a full growing season to develop dense, aromatic rhizomes worth harvesting. Pulling it early produces thin, fibrous roots with weak flavor. Patience is the entire technique with ginger, and that patience pays off in a harvest that tastes nothing like the dried-out, stringy root you buy at the store. The ninth and final vegetable is leeks. Leeks are among the most expensive vegetables per pound at any American grocery store, and the base you normally discard will regrow usable growth with almost no effort. When you buy leeks and use the green tops, place the white root base in a shallow dish of water for 3 days, and then transplant it into 4 inches of good potting mix. It will produce a cluster of tender green shoots from the same root base within 2 to 3 weeks. These shoots are thinner than the original stalk and better suited to cooking because they are more evenly tender throughout. This is not an endless permanent supply, but it is a reliable way to get a meaningful second harvest from something you already purchased. American flag is the leek variety most commonly sold in American grocery stores. It is cold hardy to zone 3, grows 12 to 18 inches tall, and tolerates hard frost, meaning in zone 6 and above you can leave regrown leeks in a container through winter and harvest them in early spring. Plant the base deeper than feels natural, burying it up to 3 inches in the soil, which blanches the sower portion of the new growth and keeps it white and tender rather than tough and green. Now think honestly about what you have spent at the grocery store on these 9 vegetables over the last 3 years. Green onions at $2 a bunch, romaine at $3 a head, garlic at $1 a bulb, ginger at $4 for a small piece you only used half of. For most American households that cook at home with any regularity, the total spent on just these 9 vegetables over 3 years sits somewhere between $400 and $900. A significant portion of that spending went to vegetables that wilted or rotted before they were fully used. Every vegetable in today's video reduces that number, some dramatically, some modestly, all of them meaningfully. Here is what I want you to picture. It is a Saturday morning in October. You walk out your back door with a colander. You pull a handful of green onions from the same roots you planted in March. You cut the outer leaves from a kale plant that has been feeding you since August. You dig sweet potatoes from a container you filled with one grocery store tuber in May. You go back inside. You did not buy any of that. That is not a hobby garden. That is a food system you built from grocery store scraps, and it belongs to you entirely. That is not laziness. That is smart growing. That is choosing plants designed to produce real food from minimal investment, and trusting them to do exactly that. Here is what today's 9 vegetables do for you. Green onions that regrow from roots you are going to throw away and produce continuously for years without replanting. Garlic that multiplies from one bulb into dozens with nothing but time and cool soil, and will rarely need to be bought again. Sweet potatoes that turn one grocery store tuber into multiple plants and a real harvest of food by the end of summer. Romaine lettuce that gives you a genuine second flush of tender sweet leaves in fall when the timing is right. Celery that regrows from the base you already cut off and gives you fresh stalks for cooking at almost zero cost. Kale that gets sweeter after frost and can be propagated from stem cuttings when conditions are right. Cabbage that produces tender secondary heads after the first harvest without any replanting. Ginger that grows in a container, spreads underground, and produces a harvest that tastes nothing like anything you have ever bought. And leeks that regrow from the base you are going to compost and survive hard frost to feed you in early spring. These are the vegetables that belong in your garden. Subscribe to Easy Harvest Gardens right now, and next week's video is going to show you exactly how to build a 4-season harvest calendar using these same plants so that something is always ready to pick, no matter what month it is. If you are not subscribed, there is a real chance that video simply does not find you. Hit the subscribe button, drop your state in the comments, and then go check your produce drawer, because your first planting material is probably already in there.